Hey guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever applies to you. Welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Julia. I'm a contemporary singing specialist based in Australia. And today is day one of a little something that I'm hoping to do for you guys for Christmas. So because I am known for my last minute premieres and upload schedule of maybe when I can, I thought it would be kind of cool to do a 12 days of Christmas upload schedule. So I am going to upload a new video for the 12 days leading up to Christmas every day. I'm going to try because I want to put out more content for you guys, and I just deeply appreciate the support and encouragement that every single one of you have given me. So I thought it would be cool to start off this 12 days of uploading with a request that has been, on the books for a really long time. I was first asked to react to this from my first Nightwish reaction. It was Ghost Love Score. Someone asked me to react to this, and since then I've just been consistently asked to react to it. So today I am finally reacting to Unleash the Archers performing their song Awakening. Let's get into it. Oh my God. Okay, we're off to an intense start. These musicians are really tight. Dang. Okay, that's a lot of energy just straight off the bat. Whew. Okay. I don't have perfect pitch. Hand to God, I don't have perfect pitch. Okay. Sustained D5 mixed metallic belt without over tightening and without absolutely shredding her larynx. This song has such insane energy that I just need to calm down. 1 second. There are quite a few things that happened. Okay, let's start off with one of the more simple things that's happening. As a vocalist, she is staying in her first register. So speech register, modal register, M1, which is mechanism 1, that sort of speaking place, that registration is what she's predominantly using. She's mixing as she's going up into the belt, because when you mix, you can get that harsher metallic quality through the mix and like where you're placing it. It also has a hell of a lot more longevity to it than if you're trying to take your chest voice up too high. If you're trying to take that really heavy speechy quality up, or the weight of that quality up too high. So she is mixing for that belt. Tone wise, there's a lot of darker qualities in her sound. It almost sounds like she's using her tongue root at times to get this wider, darker sound through her voice, but it's not there all the time, because she's also using a little bit of constriction with her sound. She's also using some mild distortion in places, but it's on and then it's off, which tells me that that is a choice for her. It's not an involuntary sound which will control her. She is in 100% control of it. Her breath stamina. Dang. She had me from the very first vowel, that opening phrase, extended vowel, if you will, because it didn't over tighten, it didn't over squeeze, it just stayed at this perfect amount of space throughout. And that OR, I think it was an OR. Yeah, so she's up around this D5 a lot. To open with that, she must have buckets of vocal stamina, because normally you would get those kinds of sounds towards the end of the song, towards the build of the song. I don't know how this song is going to build, because it's such high energy from the very beginning. But I mean, in the verse, they change it slightly because she's got those darker qualities in her voice. So it does feel like we're in a different sort of vibe of the song. I guess what I'm getting at is her breath support through there is damn near flawless, because if you don't have that consistency of breath support, you start to over squeeze here and the sound tightens and becomes more constricted. And then all of a sudden we get to the end of the belt, and it's cost us something. It's cost us energy, it's cost us vocal stamina, and then the rest of the song, you can start to hear the sound not necessarily declining quickly, but you can hear that the vocal quality isn't as comfortable for that particular performer. So that's really cool. Like the variety of the darker into the constriction and throughout the verses, and then she hits that chorus, which is where more of that breath stamina and the belt stamina comes in. If you're an inexperienced belter, choruses like that are very intense, and yet she finishes it and it doesn't look like it's like, oh, it was a walk in the park for her. That on its own is amazing. So thus far, cool variety through the verses, mostly in her first register, mixing up into that chorus around that D5, demonstrating lots of experience with that particular kind of belt, but not just the experience, the stamina for being able to do that and then support those long, really ringy metallic phrases. The other thing she's doing well is utilizing the vowel. So she'll use the vowel to widen and release from certain constricted sounds. I'll go back and see if I can re-find it. But you'll hear it. She'll use something that's like mildly distorted or constricted, and then she'll release to the vowel very quickly within the next part of the phrase. So let's find it. So you could hear on suffocating, it had that constricted sound to it. And that is happening around your throat. But then she's hitting the vowel and all of that just disappears. It just relaxes. Let's listen to it again. The vowel is where that power is coming from. Way! And it's like a lower, wider set A vowel, as opposed to going way, which is like high and tight. Anyway, let's just keep going. breathing stamina. Her breath stamina is awesome. If your breath stamina goes, it's like game over as far as like intense vocal sounds. I did want to mention that I noticed in the first chorus, but I just didn't want to keep talking after that first pause for too long. I noticed that there's obviously other vocal lines and there's effects that are being put on the voice because this is obviously not a live performance where, you know, things can be edited. This has had some editing done to it, some sound editing, some things added to the quality of the sound. That does not mean that she can't do these things, though. If you have someone who cannot make anything close to these sounds and you try to edit it into sounding like they can, it's going to become very obvious, like the digital quality becomes overwhelming in the particular sound that you're listening to. So if she couldn't hit these notes in that way with that tone, no amount of editing is going to be able to fix that. It's not going to be able to make it sound natural, if that's what I'm getting at. So even though I can hear that effects are being put on the voice, that does mean that I'm listening to more than one vocal line at a time, and it sounds like it could even be her voice that's just being put on like a different harmony or on a different level, if you will. So I think that's really cool. But I did just want to mention that because there will be some people being like, you didn't notice the thing. It's like, yes, it's there. It's quite obvious from the very first note that there are effects that are being put on her particular sound, and it's stylistically appropriate. So anyway, so we're gonna keep going. His scream sounds similar to Tatiana's. In Pisces, that kind of like the demons are coming to drag you to hell kind of sound, that then also has that higher quality that comes through the scream as well. Anyway. Okay, so the reason I've paused it is because it's quite obvious when you're watching this video. You can see the lead singer's jaw is relaxing. Her mouth is opening more, basically, as she ascends in pitch. So as her particular vowel that she's using, as she needs to then make that go higher and higher and higher, the mouth is opening more and more and more, and you can actually see it like quite easily, that mouth opening. So I'll just go back and re-find it. Of course, you can see her mouth is opening depending on how high she needs to take that pitch. Yeah, okay, so she's still going up to around that D5, and the mouth is opening. And the reason why a singer might choose to open their mouth is to keep the tone consistent. If you want the scientific reason for why that would keep the sound more consistent, or why belters in particular will utilize that, if you want like the sound acoustics reasoning for that. I might pop that at the end as part of maybe some bonus shenanigans. But the reason why a singer might choose to open their mouth like that as they're ascending in pitch is to keep the tone consistent. There's a bunch of acoustic phenomena that's happening in the mouth, and if you don't wind up opening your mouth as you ascend, it sort of means that the inside, the vocal tract, the way that the sound has to travel up and out through the mouth no longer meets the same conditions in order to maintain the tonal quality that the singer is after. So sometimes it can make it easier to sing higher by opening your mouth. The other thing that she's doing as she's opening her mouth though is she's not letting her larynx basically leap out of her mouth. It is definitely high. Her larynx is in a high position, but she's not squeezing it. She's allowing the space, the acoustics of the sound to give her that sound quality, as opposed to squeezing the absolute poop out of the sound. So I will dive a little bit more into that as part of some bonus shenanigans. But yeah, you can see her jaw moving as she's ascending in pitch. It is definitely something that you will do, particularly for belters who are belting high. Once you get to a certain pitch, so like a C sharp and above, you'll see people tend to really open their mouth if they want that belt to have a particular quality to it. So she is belting up around C sharp D area repeatedly. So she would have to make sure that she can do everything that she can to keep things consistent so that nothing is overtaxing her more than some of the sounds that she's using already are. Belting is like a whole body thing. It can be quite exhausting, and so you need that stamina there, but part of that stamina is having techniques which can facilitate easier production of a particular quality that you're after. So anyway, I just thought I would mention that. Somebody get that drummer some water. Oh my God. I actually was thinking that throughout, I'm just listening to how much the kid is doing and just thinking I wouldn't last 2 seconds doing what he's doing. Not only because I can't play the drums, but even if I could play the drums, just from the sheer amount of things he's having to do and having to do consistently throughout this song. It started heavy and high energy, and it just kept that all the way throughout. It was just opening with high energy, and then verses lower energy, but only because the vocalist is in a slightly lower pitch, and then way back up into high energy for the chorus, and then slightly less energy for the verse, but it's still fairly high energy there. It's just, God, I'm sweating just watching that. That's an intense song. So it's a lot going on energy-wise, and I think that I have a funny feeling that the singer probably doesn't feel exhausted after singing this, only because of how consistent and efficient her sounds were throughout. The belting is always going to cost you energy, but if you have stamina for belting and if you have experience, you sort of don't feel that cost as strongly as you might when you're first learning something. When you first learn something, the energy required and the sort of way that you navigate certain sounds, that all on its own is just a whole new level of exhausting, and I don't get the feeling that she's new to any of this, not from the way that she sings. Anyway, so I think I spoke to a lot of the things that I wanted to speak to when I was pausing earlier, but overall loved the tonal changes. She did stay in first register, so I didn't get an opportunity to hear how she would go utilizing another form of vocal registration, but to be honest, in a song like this, I don't think it would be appropriate, and what she did with her first register, it really met the energy of the song, and that on its own is incredible because it's such a high energy song. The instrumentalists were so flipping consistent and just so tight. For example, in the instrumental section, the speed at which the drummer was drumming and then the fact that the pitch was ascending, I could feel my heart rate increasing. purely just because it felt like we're building and building and building and building and building and building. It almost felt like I was going to have a heart attack. So that was really cool. It's like the music like reached out and was just like, energy, stuff is happening. So that was kind of cool. Overall, really good vocal decision making, and yeah, there's nothing much else that I would really say about this apart from I kind of want to see what else she can do, because this song is so high energy that it doesn't really allow for as much like light and shade. It's not the point of the song. So I would love to maybe see her voice in that context. But yeah, cool song. That was really awesome. Anyways, that is it for me today, guys. I hope that you enjoyed that. If you did like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, click the subscribe button and the notification bell beside it for more just like this one. As usual, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're staying healthy, and I will see you next time. Bye. Okay, let's get all sciencey on this. Hey guys, voiceover Julia here, because apparently video Julia went straight into uni lecture mode and dove pretty much into what the heck does that even mean land. So I thought that I might try and simplify a few things here so that you have some kind of key info before I dive into the whole mouth opening as pitch ascends thing. There are a few key sort of sound acoustic things that are important to at least be aware of, if not like understand, before we can talk about changing acoustic parameters to influence consistency of tone. The first thing would be to know that when you're actually listening to the human voice, you're not just hearing a simple sound, you're hearing a complex sound, which is made up of two parts. So you have your fundamental frequency, which in the case of singing, you would hear that as pitch. So the note that you sing, ah, that note that you're hearing there, that's actually just the frequency that you happen to be perceiving at that particular time. So we call that one the fundamental frequency. At the same time, there are frequencies that are occurring above that fundamental. So above the pitch that you hear, there are other frequencies that are being produced at the exact same time. And while we might not hear that quite as clearly as the fundamental frequency, it actually does change how we perceive the sound. So if you want to think of the fundamental frequency as the pitch that you hear, think of the harmonics that happen above it, or those frequencies above that fundamental, as the timbre or the tone or the color of the sound. So even if you had two people singing the same note, the timbre can be different between those two people because of their own unique dimensions of their vocal tract, which influence kind of what happens to the fundamental and those harmonics as they make their journey up through the vocal tract and out of the mouth. And while that fundamental and while those harmonics are on that vocal journey, they kind of also have to interact with a few other things that are going on. So they're interacting with the shape of the vocal tract. But one of the other things that's really important for them to interact with, and this is where it relates to the mouth opening, are what's called formants, or resonant frequencies of the space that the sound is moving through. Each space, all on its own, without any vocal pitch, and like just completely separate it from the actual pitch and the harmonics that are being produced at the vocal fold level. Completely remove that. Just the space, all on its own, has what's called a formant or a resonant frequency. So think of it like this. If you blow into the top of a bottle, it produces a note, right? Well, I mean, a bottle doesn't necessarily have vocal folds, so where is the pitch coming from? Basically, when you blow air into the top of that bottle, the note that you hear is that particular bottle's resonant frequency, or its formant, if you will. So depending on how much of a gap or how much space is in that bottle will change what pitch you hear. Larger resonant spaces produce lower resonant frequencies, and smaller resonant spaces produce higher resonant frequencies. That's why with that same bottle, if it's maybe just a little bit empty, the pitch that you get when you blow through the top of it sounds a lot higher than after you've drunk like maybe halfway down or 3/4 of that bottle, the pitch starts to lower. So let's say you had two bottles, one was slightly full and the other one was quite a bit full. Those two bottles will produce different tones because the dimensions of that space are different. The one with the smaller dimensions is going to produce the higher pitch. The one with the larger dimensions is going to produce the lower pitch. The vocal tract has a few of these resonant spaces, if you will, but just to keep it simple, I'm just going to talk about two. So the first resonant space, if you will, the first space that will have its own resonant frequency is the one just above the larynx. So it's called the laryngopharynx. And it's the one just above the vocal folds and not quite into the mouth area, because that's where our second resonant space is. So we've gone up through that first resonating space, which is the laryngopharynx, into the second resonating space, which is called the oropharynx, or basically your mouth. So if you want to think of it as like you have two bottles there, if that helps at all, you have one resonating space and then you have the second resonating space. So we're just going to talk about those two for now. Thinking back to earlier with our bottles, I mentioned that the dimensions influence what resonant frequency that space happens to have. So your vocal tract is basically a giant squeezy tube, which means there's no set dimensions, if you will, for those resonating spaces. Depending on what you want to do with your voice, you can change the dimensions of those resonating spaces, therefore affecting their formants or their resonant frequencies. One way of doing that is by opening your mouth. So if you open your mouth, you make the resonating space, the first one, so our, let's call it formant 1 area, which is above the larynx, you make that space smaller when you open your mouth, because when you open your mouth, you're basically decreasing that space at the back there, which means the formant or the resonant frequency for that particular space is going to get higher, as opposed to if you keep your mouth kind of closed, then that space remains a little bit larger, meaning that the formant or the space's resonant frequency is probably going to be a bit lower. So now you kind of understand some basics of vocal acoustics. Firstly, that at the vocal fold level, we produce a fundamental frequency, which is the pitch that you hear when you're listening to a singer, but also harmonics above that fundamental, which influences the tone or the timbre that we hear. And those two things have to make their way through the vocal tract, past these spaces that have their formant or resonant frequencies. That's kind of where the magic happens, actually, because the harmonics that are being produced as you sing, they have the ability to interact with the resonant frequencies of the space that it is traveling through. That's right, you can have a little acoustic marriage there between those two particular acoustic properties. And now that I have explained that, we know what fundamental frequency means, we know what a harmonic is, we know what a formant is. Now that we know what those things are, I'm going to return back to Video Julia to sort of explain the phenomena of that acoustic joining of the harmonics with the formants. So the phenomena that I was referring to with the jaw opening is something that is more commonly referred to with classical voices. They call it formant tuning, and basically it's where they try and get the harmonics above the fundamental frequency to align with the formant frequency of the space that the sound is traveling through. If you get one or more of the harmonics aligned with the formant frequency, if they get a little like acoustic marriage going, the sound is significantly more powerful. So let's say you had one particular note where the harmonics above the fundamental and the formant frequency were together, but then on the note above it, they kind of weren't on there anymore because the fundamental frequency went up, which means the harmonics also went up. Then they're no longer able to sort of acoustically mesh together. You lose that power. So by opening the mouth, you change the dimensions of the space that the sound is resonating in, which means you actually change the formant frequency. So as she's opening her mouth, she's basically making sure that the formant frequency of one of the spaces that the sound is going through, in particular the one above the larynx, becomes smaller. Because when you open your jaw, when you open your mouth, this space back here becomes smaller, which means that frequency rises. There's a very well-known researcher called Sundberg who has done a lot of acoustic analysis, and one of the points that he makes is that if you want to maintain the energy of a particular sound, if you want to get the benefit of the acoustic energy being more powerful, that means less work for your muscles to do. If you want the acoustic energy to be as powerful as it can get, you never want the first formant, which is the one that comes from the space above the larynx, not the one in the mouth, the space that's in the above the larynx. You never want the first formant to be lower than the fundamental frequency. So as that pitch increases, if you want it to still be able to have that little acoustic marriage with the formant frequency, then your formant frequency also has to be able to ascend as well if you're wanting it to sort of be able to connect with one or more of the harmonics that are being produced above the fundamental. Thankfully, there are many, many harmonics that are produced above the fundamental, but usually it's still a good idea to stay on top of shapes and dimensions so that we're not going for a really, really high fundamental frequency, but we haven't made those adjustments in the vocal tract that allow that little marriage between the formant frequency and the harmonics above the fundamental to occur. So let's say this is the fundamental frequency here, and these are the first two harmonics above it. This is terrible, but hopefully you'll get what I mean. So we've got this, and then let's say these are the two harmonics above it. And this is our formant frequency. Let's say it's aligned with that one. But now my fundamental has gone up, and I'm no longer, these two can't have their little acoustic marriage. No, come back. So by making that first formant space, which is the one here, smaller by opening the jaw, we effectively raise that formant frequency, and these two can continue to have their little acoustic marriage, which makes the sound overall significantly stronger. So if you want the sound to be consistent, you want that power to remain there. You can't just have one sound that, meets the acoustic requirements so that these two can have their little acoustic fun time, You need to be able to meet the conditions of the new pitch, which means changing the dimensions and therein changing the formant frequency of the space that the sound is moving through. So that's a little bit of the science behind that. If you're here, let me know in the comments if that made any sense to you at all. If you want more of an in-depth sort of description on that, I don't mind at all. Just let me know and I'll see what I can do. Alrighty, guys. Bye.